Shalom, Kahalo Yahweh Ba'ashim Hawashah Ba'ashim Kodash. Double honors to the elder apostles and elder bishops of GMS, including the elders that came before them that taught us its truth. Shalom and salutations to all the brothers out pushing the word and truth and sincerity, the hopeful elect tabernacle of David. I'm the brother Yashawan, back with the WW3 Daily update. Shalom and salutations to you as well. This is Joel 3 and 9. We're going to read a couple of different versions. King James, proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, prepare war, wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up. NIV, proclaim this among the nations. Okay, here you have Gentiles, here you have the nations. Okay, prepare for war, same thing. Rouse the warriors, let all the fighting men draw near and attack. NLT, say to the nations far and wide, get ready for war. Call out your best warriors, let all your fighting men advance for the attack. Consecrate for war. Stir up the mighty men. Let all the men of war draw near, let them come up. All right, so this is the time that we're in right now. Call out this message among the nations. Set yourselves apart for war. Okay. The pagan nations, who are the pagan nations? All except for the nation of Israel. Right? All you other races, if you will. Right here, say to the nations, get ready for war. Be eager to fight. Line up for battle and prepare to attack. It's pretty plain. Do we see that in the world right now? We see it all over the world. Okay? We see it all over the world right now. Even in the Sudan right now. The Sudan is getting ready. Not Ethiopia, not Eritrean, not the Tigray, in the Sudan, Africa. All right, so yeah, sanctify a war. All right, so let's take a look. Battlefield. See, Military and Foreign Affairs Network with the Voice of Reason 1 day ago. He's got a new one out today, but let's briefly touch on what's going on in Bakhmut, right? It says, Battlefield Ukraine, Russia pounds Sloviansk and Bakhmut. Now listen to what he says about what's actually going on in this region. We'll let it play a little bit and then we'll go to today's. Basically going to say the same thing, but how day by day they're making very slow movement this way, shutting down this whole, progression, if you will. And then there's talk of Wagner, right? The ones actually doing the fighting. They're saying, hey, the objective is pretty much secured, right? We've done what we set out to do. Now we need to, call an end to the, whatever they're calling this in place of a war, this campaign, right? Which is why you see what is going on in the South China Sea beginning to flare up even more. So anyway, because they're really hiding what's going on in the Valley of Yehoshaphat. So
good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military Post, the Voice of Reason. Today we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. And today we start right off where we were yesterday, of the ongoing Battle of Bakhmut. Ukrainian authorities are now calling this the most bloodiest battle of the war. Now, with that being said, in all probability, the reason why the Ukrainians are calling it the most bloodiest battle of the war, is the risk of envelopment of Ukrainian forces that are caught in Bakhmut. If we kind of zoom in, and we've done this yesterday, you can see now that it is going to be very hard for Ukrainian forces to move those brigades, and there are a number of combat brigades in this Bakhmut pocket that would have to be moved west. And unfortunately for the Ukrainians, if the Ukrainians try to move out of this pocket, they are then subjected to withering artillery fire that destroys these convoys. And we've seen repeated attempts of Ukrainian forces to both move in and move out of Bakhmut, and many of those convoys have met very, very dire fates. And what I'll do is, again, I'll go up to the deployment map where you, the viewer, can kind of see exactly what I'm talking about. So again, the Ukrainian political apparatus in Kiev has decided that this was a city that they did not want to lose, meaning Bakhmut. And they have deployed large amounts of combat resources, much to the chagrin of the United States, the Pentagon generals, Western European generals, have said, look, this is not a good idea. But Zelensky and, again, the political apparatus in Kiev have stuck to their guns and decided that this was a worthy sword for its forces to fall upon. So again, you have large elements of the 77th Air Mobile Brigade, you have the 93rd Mechanized Brigade, you have the 3rd National Guard Assault Brigade, you have a multitude of territorial brigades and other forces that are deployed in Bakhmut and right now are at risk of being completely cut off and then destroyed and then having to capitulate to Russian forces. Some of the most heaviest fighting right now is taking place. If we kind of zoom in again, this map gives you just a kind of a better view of the situation. Is the main railway terminal in this locale. This has reportedly come under Russian control and back to Ukrainian control and then back to Russian control. And
so you get the point. It's a highly contested situation, Bakhmut. But now we fast forward to today. What we just watched was this, which is a day ago. This is today what we're about to watch right now. But look at Sudan. Day 2 Sudan. Look, battlefield Sudan, heavy fighting in the capital. That's different. This Military Foreign Affairs Network, he goes into what's going on in Ethiopia, actually everywhere, but mainly, what the focus is right now, which is Ukraine, which is dying down, right? Because after Russia takes Bakhmut, the only real choice they have is to go the way of Victoria Nuland, which is to try to take back Crimea, and that's going to start a World War III with tactical nukes, and they're not ready for that. So they're going to let that die down. They're going to shift the focus to the South China Sea and try to distract you with that instead of showing you the real war, which is going on in the Middle East, the Valley of Yehoshaphat. All right, so let's watch a little bit of this.
Take final.
Slovakia, and then we'll go ahead and close. Let's see. Start this back. Let him do his diatribe. This is today's.
good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. So while events continue in and around Bakhmut, we continue to see this Bakhmut noose tightening on Ukrainian forces. If we go back just over the last several days, you can kind of see what is happening and continues to happen with the Russians slowly but surely gaining ground. If we go back to the essentially the 1st of April, we look at the areas that were contested, and then again we fast forward to present day, and you can kind of see what is clearly happening within the confines of this conflict. And here we go, kind of proceeding forward. You can see what the Russians are exactly trying to do, and now we're at present day. So again, the eventuality looks to be that these forces in Bakhmut are eventually going to be encircled. But I think we also have to look at other areas of the conflict. And there is an incredibly ominous buildup of Russian forces to the north of Seversk. And I've continued to watch this very closely. There are more additional Russian forces that have brought in. So we're going to start. If we look at this Seversk salient or pocket that appears to have been created with Ukrainian forces in this area, and if we go and we look at the Ukrainian forces first and the deployment map, you have.
And you can imagine where he's going with this. It's going to go the way of Bakhmut. Okay, if you got a bunch of Russian forces amassing up here, they're going to close this down and do the same thing that they're doing in Bakhmut. All right, so we'll go ahead and end that there. And I was just, last night, I was listening to the Colonel, and he said something that was very important. So let me try to find that, okay, as to what's actually going on here. Let me see, let's see if I can find the Colonel and what was being said, and we can bring it out. Let's see, here it is here. So let's see, because this is relatively long. Okay, so this is Red Pill TV. How long ago? 1 day ago. Colonel Douglas McGregor. Everyone will be wiped out in 10 days. This is serious. So let's listen, see if we can find in the first couple of minutes what he says that is very profound about what's actually going on over there and what Wagner, the mercenaries that Vlad hired, the mercenary army, if you will, who are actually doing the fighting, they're kind of, on their own, from their own point of view, they're like, okay, we have achieved Russia's goal, right? And you got to listen to it. It's pretty profound. Let's see. Comes right up.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the show. We have a very special treat. Today, I am joined by Colonel Douglas McGregor. He is a decorated veteran, the author of 5 groundbreaking books on military transformation. He holds a PhD in international relations, and he is a highly respected expert on defense and foreign policy. He was also the senior advisor to the Secretary of Defense in the Trump administration. So, Colonel McGregor, thank you so much for joining me.
Sure.
Well, you have been remarkably accurate with your analysis and predictions, especially covering Ukraine. And you have said that the war will likely end with Russia controlling all of eastern Ukraine, if not all of Ukraine. And we're starting to see a more accurate picture emerge in the media about what's really happening. So can you kind of summarize what you believe will happen next in Ukraine and why it's important to ordinary Americans?
Yeah, well, I think it is very important to Americans to know the truth. And the truth has been very unpopular for quite a while. Don't want to cover too much history, but this war has been brewing for well over a decade. Some people would argue for at least 20, 25 years because of the unwillingness in the West to look at the reality that the way the map is drawn of Ukraine, it is inaccurate, frankly. There are Ukrainians, true Ukrainians, but they did not live in Crimea. It's never been part of Ukraine. And most of the area that we call the Donbass, the Donetsk Basin, is really Russian, and the people that live there are Russian. And the easy way is to go back and look at the electoral maps showing how people voted over the last, previous elections. You see that the East is overwhelmingly voting in favor of the pro-Russian candidate, and the West, which is on the other side of the Dnieper River, is usually voting overwhelmingly for the anti-Russian candidate, whoever that happens to be. So there was always a need to address this. And I had argued for a plebiscite. Other people argued for it. I also always felt very strongly that it was in Ukraine's interest to be a neutral state.
When Russia's Nord Stream pipeline was set,
Slovakia. Very important, so I'm going to try to wait for him to get to it.
To be a neutral state, that it could be much like Austria, and like Austria, could profit enormously from its neutrality. And this, of course, was sabotaged by first the Bush administration, then subsequently Obama. And I think that Trump was subverted by his own Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense and his entire national security team, who all wanted to press ahead with this expansion of NATO and incorporate Ukraine. So I think President Trump was left sort of standing there without anybody supporting him, and then found himself out of office. And it wasn't long thereafter that Putin gave up, because he said, there's no one I can talk to. There's no one who will negotiate with me. I'm left no choice. Because what we did after 2014 was build this enormous Ukrainian military power that was designed to attack Russia, frankly, from eastern Ukraine. Ukrainians said they wanted to get back Crimea. We said fine. And they wanted to punish the Russians living in Luhansk, and Donetsk for being Russians and not converting to become 100% Ukrainian, speaking Ukrainian, and so forth, so on. So bottom line is you get this war. And from the very beginning, I think Putin made some miscalculations. He thought that if he demonstrated how serious he was and his country was about the growing threat to Russia in eastern Ukraine, that we would pay attention to it. Well, we did, but we decided to double down on the threat that we were creating. And his great fear was that in addition to this Ukrainian army, that of course theater ballistic missiles would show up that would put his entire nuclear deterrent as well as all of his major cities at risk. So he marched in, and initially it was a very cautious approach designed to do as little damage as possible, kill as few people as possible. And it took really almost until the summer to figure out there's nobody out there. Nobody's going to talk to us. Nobody's going to negotiate. We're stuck. We're going to have to change our entire approach. And so we go into this long haul approach, which is basically a 30-month plan for a 30-month war. That's what he adopted in the summer. We've had this massive Russian military buildup to the point now where we have what Biden and his supporters said he didn't want, which is this large and powerful Russian military power sitting on NATO's eastern border. In other words, he went in theoretically to protect NATO, and he got the opposite. And NATO is rapidly falling apart. And we see from these leaked documents that have come out the tremendous disunity inside the NATO alliance. And for your purposes, I'm sure your listeners know that one of the fatal mistakes that we made was to assume that Russia was this economically weak, backward power. I think someone put it, was it McCain, who said Russia's a gas station with nuclear weapons.
That's right.
They discovered they could not be more wrong. So Russia has an abundance of resources and energy, of course, which makes it the perfect partner for China that needs all of that to continue to sustain its economic expansion. And we've ended up on the wrong side, in the sense that we're suffering economically. Our European allies are suffering very, very acutely from this war and from all these self-defeating sanctions.
Well, I was actually going to go there next. In Ukraine, we seem to have made financial sanctions the centerpiece of our military strategy, weaponizing the dollar. And economic sanctions were a useful weapon, decades ago, but the world has evolved to really neutralize them. So what implications do Western financial sanctions failing so visibly have in the geopolitical sphere here?
Well, keep in mind that for many, many decades, we've used our command of the World Bank and other financial centers, because effectively the dollar dominates everything. We not only pass on our debt to others by compelling everybody else to use the dollar, but the institutions, global institutions, use the dollar because it's convenient. And what we've done is we've effectively bullied so many people for so long that many are now saying, well, Russia's got a point, China's got a point. Why should we do business constantly in the dollar? Now, this doesn't mean that the so-called reserve currency is going to go away instantly, but I think it's in serious trouble. So this de-dollarization is very serious at this point. We shouldn't underestimate it. But I think we brought it on ourselves. If you constantly beat people over the head with, as you say, this weapon, this financial weapon, eventually they come back and say, we've had it. I mean, people living in Honduras or Costa Rica or Southeast Asia and Thailand are being told, if you want our assistance, our support, then grow these crops. Imagine that. Being told what crops you will grow and so forth. It's gotten really out of hand.
He's getting to the point, so bear with me because this geopolitical discussion he's having is actually germane, to everything that's going on. So it's not bad that you're hearing that. So, Salakia, but bear with me, he's getting there.
The sanctions are just another manifestation of this. And frankly, all the sanctions that we've imposed on Russia have turned out to be undercut anyway. So the oil and the gas, along with rare earths and every other conceivable mineral and foodstuffs, all those things are seeping out one way or the other. It's kind of, if you pass a law in the United States, and it's a fundamentally flawed law, whatever it happens to be, it's a law that everyone opposes, and people really don't want to obey it. Ultimately, what happens? It's meaningless because over time, the police decide not to enforce it because they can't. Well, that's largely what's happened to us and our financial dominance on the planet.
Something I've talked about many times on this show is that every fiat currency has failed. Some lasted months, some a century, but all have failed. And we depegged from gold in the 1970s. We continue to print these paper promises. We spend more than we take in. We're net consumers, whereas all these countries that we have tensions with are net producers. So where does the dollar go from here? You said it won't be the reserve, it won't lose that status very quickly, but did these sanctions accelerate losing that status?
Yes. Yeah, I think they contribute enormously to it. I really wish that I could drag my son into this discussion. He's a brilliant financial analyst, and he's someone I pay attention to, and I've listened to him for years, which is why I'm heavily invested in digital currency. Because
this is where he goes off with the digital currency. So he's completely wrong about this. So let him speak on it.
He's pointed out that we're really on a path to one of two destinations right now. One day.
Hi, I'm JT, and I'm.
Let me see. I might have to try to skip up and find because he's going off.
One destination, of course, is the Fed will just print money, and that's the widespread assumption. They'll continue to
trying to get to Wagner.
You have to restructure your debt.
So Lockett, bear with me.
That's right.
What do we build? What do we produce? Well, we produce a lot of military equipment and technology, but there's Eisenhower said we should try to neutralize more countries in Europe because we simply exists to make astrologers look professional. But that's never, that's another issue. But
I should have looked for it before. I'm just kind of going in the spirit, so bear with me.
10%, the dollars at 10%.
Still talking about
in the military. They're still basing budgets on 2%.
Your current military establishment remains a substantial threat to us unless, of course, we decide to attack Russia. They have an enormous nuclear arsenal. We have an enormous nuclear arsenal. We can kill each other and most of the people on the planet several times over. We don't want to use nuclear weapons. I see no evidence that Mr. Putin does. That's kind of a dumb way to look at it. Secondly, we continue to see Russia through the Cold War lens. Everyone keeps acting as though it's the Soviet Union. It's not. Russia's a very different country today. China, people can, the Communist Party of China is doing this and this. The Communist Party of China. The Communist Party of China is a joke. The Communist Party of China is just an elite organization, a cabal of people across the country that potential threats from China and Russia. And I think the president, right. We are continuing to mislead ourselves in order to sustain this tremendous spending. Well, when does it stop? I think, what was it, Ben Stein who said things go on until they can't? Mm-hmm. When did the British leave India? When our financial system is being destroyed. As a Japanese commander, Northeast Asia, from Shanghai to Chinese ports, we could do it. China knows that and has known that for to call it Ukraine the breadbasket of Europe. So the bottom line is, this is a very important development, this One Belt, One Road project. And the Europeans, of course, want to trade with China. Well, why wouldn't they? I mean, China's to the Pacific coast. They both have the same aspirations, the same goals, frankly. Chinese everywhere, but they provide you with a marketplace, whereas from the Chinese van. So the point is, no, they don't want war with us. They don't want war with anybody. So all of this war business just needs to stop. And I think if we shut up and get out of the way, this will sort itself out over the next several years. But in Asia, of course, things take time. We're the instant pudding world, which is insane. We want everything immediately. In Asia, it may be 10 years.
Taiwan, it's becoming more direct.
There are both largely extensions, because that's been the source of war and conflict in Asia for hard, and came to an agreement with the firm on Taiwan that produces these microchips. Got to get out of this 19th century mind we don't like. We do lots of things other people don't like. That's nonsense. We've got to get out of that business. You have to understand that we've got to get control of this thing, and we need to scale back our investments in defense, but we need to invest more prudently, actually deploy and fight, and keeping all of the generals and adding to them. We've got to stop it. We can't afford it.
Right? We've enjoyed the privilege of that deficit without tears, right? We've been able to.
You don't have to pay the bribes to everyone in sight. Hey, there's plenty of coal left. The local. I mean, it's like telling the Israeli is build up the Ukrainian military establishment. Now, all of this assumes, of course, that if President Trump got in there, that Putin would take him seriously. I think he probably would. But remember, President Putin has also looked at us and said, well, you know, President Trump meant well the last time. President Trump was never an enemy of the Russian people. He's not an enemy of the Chinese people. He's not an enemy of any people. But it didn't matter, did it? Because the people that held appointments in his administration were committed to hostility toward Russia, China, and elsewhere. So that's a huge problem. Who's he put in? He's got to have a completely new team. And then you're still dealing with this sort of greedy Congress, greedy Senate.
Prepared to keep this war going if we don't move in the direction of talks. But where I want to end it is, I know that you're a father. You have so much experience.
Packages for use in Syria, which is easy to do, but you can make it abundantly clear that war, not. We need to understand other people have legitimate interests.
Okay, apparently I can't find it. It was on a different. So Slovakia, but as you can see, right? Wow. This guy, his finger is on the pulse, although he's completely wrong about the CBDC. He knows what's going on over there. And basically he said that the Wagner, it couldn't have been him. The Wagner operation, who's actually doing the fighting, came up and said that, we're done. We have achieved our goal in this operation. We need to stop now and come to the table with some sort of agreement, or ceasefire, if you will. And I know it was him, or I believe it was him, unless I am completely getting it wrong. Let me see. Maybe it was someone else and I'm getting it wrong. So anyway, what I'll do is I'll come back tomorrow. I'll search it out. I'll come back tomorrow, if it be the Lord's will, and I'll straighten that whole thing out. But let's get that real quick. Even if they did bring a ceasefire, right? What would be the result of that, right? Because everything is going to culminate in World War III, regardless of what front they're on now. It could be Eastern Europe, which is Russia, Ukraine. It could be South China Sea, which is Taiwan, China, okay, and the U.S. It could be Rocket Man, which is the Korean Peninsula. All of these different uh, uh, theaters. But this is the theater, okay? This is what the scripture says. And I'm going to keep beating this dead horse. I mean, it's not dead, it's alive, all right? Here's where the real battle is. I, the Most High, Yahweh Shemel Shai, will gather the armies of the world into the valley of Jehoshaphat. That's talking about the Middle East. So the real fight is going to start between the Iranians and the so-called Israelis. Okay, that's the real fight. Everything else is a distraction, and wherever else they're fighting, in the Sudan, in Ethiopia, in Myanmar, in everywhere, wherever they're fighting all over the world, that fight is going to be interrupted when the Most High does what? Gather the armies of the world where? Into the Middle East. Okay, that's what we're watching. So, whatever peace accord that Wagner is, okay, well, we've taken all the land in Ukraine that we need. We don't need the whole country, is what they're saying. And I'll find that piece of information. I'll bring it out. But there's not going to be no ceasefire. There's not going to be any peace and safety. All right. 1 Thessalonians 5:3. For when they shall say peace and safety, which is the ceasefire, then sudden destruction cometh upon them as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. So what time are we in that can't, I mean, there's a time for peace, and what else? Let's get it. To everything, turn, there is a season. Ecclesiastes 3:1, to everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under heaven. The birds, right? 8, a time to love and a time to hate. A time of war and a time of peace. When they shall say peace and safety, we're not in that time. We're in this time. All right, so with that, Salakia for the search and non-destroy, but I'll bring that. It'll be the Lord's will. With that, I'm going to say shalom.